Welcome, welcome, Evan.
Thank you, Molly. Great to be back.
You and I both actually write about rich people. That's sort of our
This is true.
right,
This
that's
is
our
true.
hobby. I actually think these Epstein files are, in some ways, the biggest story about wealth
Mhm,
and power, the use and misuse of it. And I think the idea that there are a wealthy cabal of people who consider
mhm.
themselves to be beyond the law is entirely what this story is about.
Absolutely right. In some strange way, this is like now the master document that lays bare an entire systemic moral collapse. Like, this is the point. It's not about a few individuals, though we are much better off knowing the names of these individuals. And I think we need to continue to get as much information about the people in these files. But in fact, it's about a culture. It's about a whole set of moral beliefs, about a collapse of the idea of shame, about a collapse of the idea that you should have boundaries and standards,
Mhm.
that there's a kind of ostentation, a kind of privilege, a kind of obscenity that is beyond the pale. And, it's easy to sort of say, oh, well, are you really telling us anything that we didn't already know? Throughout the ages, there's always been rich and powerful people taking advantage of the weak. Except that doesn't mean that you then say we're going to shrug. No, what you say is that when you have an opportunity like this to lay it bare and to make it as clear and as crisp and as unbelievably frank as these emails are, it's incumbent on us as a society to say, "Okay, let's talk about it. Let's talk about exactly this problem."
I also think that what has happened here is the cover up. So
Mhm.
it is not just, we've long suspected that wealthy people were doing bad stuff broadly.
Yeah.
And with Epstein, I remember years and years ago looking at the sex offender map because there was a sex offender map app and seeing that in Central Park was Jeffrey Epstein. And I thought, how weird is it that all of us know this guy is a scary sex predator, and yet he is still living in his fancy Manhattan townhouse? I
Yeah.
remember like literally having that thought. And I didn't know him, but I had just read reporting about him and I knew that he had done evil, evil things. And what I think is so interesting about these redactions is so much of this story is about the FBI covering for itself
Mhm.
and covering for its agents and covering their complete disinterest with holding powerful people to account.
Hmm. Yeah, accountability. That is the key word here because in some ways the greatest luxury good in American life is the idea that you can escape the consequences for your own actions, for
Mm.
your own absolute, in this case, debased criminal activity. But it's also about escaping accountability when your business fails and you have the right friends who can bail you out of trouble in a way that you don't get if you're running a small business in your town. Yeah, this idea that you could somehow just slip the surly bonds of the normal physics of the world, which is to say that you screw up and you are paying the price for that. Jeffrey Epstein's life and the people who surrounded him are are examples of how if you had enough money and you have enough money in this country, you can simply buy your way out of those physics. And you do it at the expense of people without your power. And here's the piece that I think is really important to drive home too, that feels almost like we don't capture it enough in our conversations usually in this country, which is the idea that somehow shunning people like Epstein or the many people now who are found to have done bad behavior, in his orbit by staying in contact with him, that shunning them was somehow considered a kind of weak-minded thing to do. It was a kind of, oh, sort of, really, you're gonna get so caught up in that sort of ethical boundary? No, no, sorry. There are some people who have done things that are simply beyond the pale.
Are you trolling Barry Weiss? How dare you?
Take
She's
our take
keeping that CBS contributor because she is against cancel culture, except if you do something really bad, like say something she doesn't like.
I actually think Peter Attia is a prime fascinating example here because you know what's
Exactly.
amazing in his language, in the way that he tried to explain his way out of this absolutely ludicrous and indefensible behavior was that he said that at that point in his life, he'd never seen that kind of excess before. That's such a telling word, right, Molly? What he's saying is, I didn't realize that was possible and that
Right.
I could actually cross the blood-brain barrier into a world of excess like that. That is, like, such a tell, and,
Yeah.
look, he has no business continuing on as an advisor to Americans on health and good living, that's ridiculous, but,
Yeah, exactly.
that's a decision for others to make.
I also think that it's a decision that we should not allow them to get away with,
Yeah.
and I think, like, the job so what we're seeing here is that if you are at all placid, and if you
Mm.
at all believe that things will sort of turn out the way they're meant to, you're probably in the wrong, and you probably need
Yes.
like, for example, I think so much about Julie K. Brown, who was just
Mhm.
I just interviewed. Like,
W sh
that story
Amazing,
right,
amazing.
that story was
Yeah,
basically dead. It had
yeah.
happened, she had got they he had gotten the sweetheart deal, there were victims, but, it's sorta settled,
Mhm.
and here's Julie, and she goes out and she starts talking to these victims, and it turns out that there are not 10 victims, there are not 15 victims, there are more than 1,000 victims, and they
Yeah.
have spanned 4 decades and decades and decades. And so that is a story that would have never, Jeffrey Epstein would have gotten away with it. And
Yeah.
like it and I just want to say one last thing in this very long-winded question, which is yesterday I was on Nicole Walsh's show, and I met one of the victims, and she said she had been victimized from 2004 to 2005. So you realize, like, the first
Wow. Yeah.
allegations we saw
Yeah.
were, like, in the 90s.
Yeah.
So here are women who this is just absolutely preventable.
Absolutely, and in a way, this is a prime demonstration of the thing people want most of all these days, which is a reminder that we are not, in fact, powerless in the face of
Mhm.
this kind of abuse and
Mm.
of this kind of political and social and ethical abuse, which is exactly
Yeah.
what we're talking about here. That as a society, one of the things we've learned is that unless you have Nudnik reporters, bless us all, who are willing to just honestly keep driving home and
Mhm.
keep driving home the fact that these questions haven't been answered. This story hasn't gone away. I mean, Julie Brown, in the best way, is in the tradition of investigative reporting that goes back to like Ida Tarbell and Upton
Mm.
Sinclair. And the reason
Yeah.
I mention folks from the Gilded Age is this is what
Yeah.
we're talking about. We're talking about
Yeah.
now the investigative reporting that is bursting open the mechanics of our Gilded Age at the moment. And she is
Mhm.
showing us, oh, okay, in this day and age, these are the ways in which our most abusive tycoons are taking advantage of people.
Yeah. No, that's really good. Upton Sinclair. I'm thinking about 'cause I'm writing this thing about my grandfather, so Upton
Mm,
Sinclair has come into my
yeah,
foreground. But I wonder it is true, and that is it's funny because it's like Epstein is such a metaphor for the moment we're in right now,
100%.
which
Yeah, he's
is
our ultimate creature of this age. I mean, my colleague John Cassidy at the New
oh yeah.
Yorker had such a great way of putting it. He just said in the last couple of days, I'll get this mostly right, but he wrote basically that Epstein is the ultimate creature of an age in which wealth and ostentation and unaccountability are associated with social status. Think about it.
Yeah.
In a way, that's an astonishing thing that the idea of being able to get away with something becomes a status symbol. That's one of the things that Epstein was living out by then continuing to have all of these dealings with the most powerful people. So now we have somebody like Howard Lutnick, right? I mean,
Mhm.
Howard Lutnick, who it turns out has been lying to the American public, lying to everybody about his contacts with Jeffrey Epstein. And are we supposed to just kind of shrug and say, oh, that was just a scheduling confusion? Give me a break. I mean, at a certain point, why is this person serving in our name in the cabinet? I just don't understand how this can go on much longer.
Yeah, I mean, so that's the question, and then you think about Howard Lutnick, and then you think about John Phelan, the
Yeah.
undersecretary for the Navy who flew on Epstein's jet. And then you think about and who got that job not because he had a long career of Navy service, but because he was a Donald Trump donor and a friend from Palm Beach. And then you think about, there are just like at every point, is John Phelan guilty? Who knows? He flew on a plane. He said he only flew once. Who knows? But the point is, even the like larger corruption of like donors getting real government jobs
Eh,
versus, for years, donors got ambassadorships. And in
right.
some ways, a door was opened to this level of corruption and it may have been opened during a Republican presidency, but it may have also been opened during a Democratic presidency. Like there's certainly the road to the
Yeah.
place we are now, the terrible, corrupt place
Mhm.
we are now is really paved
Yes.
with quite a lot of, inches,
I
so speak
totally
to that.
agree. I totally agree. Look, I've believed for a long time, and I've written essentially my last 2 books are on the fact that Donald Trump is a symptom of the disease. Yes, he is a source of all kinds of incredible toxic effects on America, but he is a symptom of a much deeper disease. And that deeper disease is about what happens when you get so much money and power that you simply detach from the realm that the rest of us inhabit. You're able to seclude yourself almost literally and physically and geographically on your island or on your yacht. But then you're also able to seclude yourself in a world of people who have taken a kind of moral holiday where they've suddenly decided these rules don't matter for us. These are for the little people. I remember Leona Helmsley, who is like the original, the OG tycoon of the 80s.
Mhm.
And she at one point, it was in her tax evasion case where somebody remembered her saying, "We don't pay taxes. Taxes are for the little people."
Only
And
the little people pay taxes.
exactly. And
Yeah.
that right there was like a preview. That was positively decorous and small ball compared to what we're dealing with now. But honestly, I see a connection in the way that if we allowed that kind of world to flourish, and that, of course, was the world that Donald Trump grew up in
New
and
York
came
City
of
real
age
estate
in.
people. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's now the world that he seeks to thrust upon the rest of us every day of every year.
It's funny because I think, so much about I'm exactly that age, right? I'm exactly the
Mm.
Leona Helmsley,
Me
taxes
too,
are for
Molly.
the little people
Exactly.
on the cover of the New York Post. It comes back to this idea that there was a certain class of New Yorkers, and I'm thinking, it really does come back to Roy Cohn.
Yeah.
Roy Cohn, the
Right?
consigliere, he
The
was
advisor. Yeah.
he was really the advisor of McCarthy, Joe McCarthy, and
Mhm.
then he comes in, that's sort of his rise to fame, and then he creates a world of corruption where he's able to get both mafia figures who really did run the city during the 70s and 80s, and also and then eventually these sort of real estate families that kind of took over that mantle a little
Yeah,
bit in the
totally.
90s and 2000s.
And in a way, what Roy Cohn represented and the tutelage which he then delivered to Donald Trump was this combination of things. It was that politics is not about what actually is the morally correct thing to do. It's about power and submission. It's
Yeah.
about that the strong will do what they will and the weak will do what they must. And it was also about the idea that there are worlds of secrecy and interior power that you keep
Mm.
shielded from the public, that you never allow the regular people to get a visibility on, that somehow that like that's the way the world should be organized. And I think that there part of what's so important about this moment with the revelation of what's in these emails is that it is actually prying open the doors of a world that is the most closed. I'm not talking about a very specific world around one financier. I'm talking about an entire world of people who are favor trading and letting themselves off the
Mhm.
hook for mistakes that they're making at the public's expense year
Mhm.
after year after year. That's really what we're seeing.
and buying Woody Allen $10,000 worth of underwear. I think it's like,
Right.
I liked Woody Allen, I knew Woody Allen, and I think that we should all be done with Woody Allen now because
Oof. Yeah.
it is not there's no coming back from and Sun Yi, like, there's no
No.
coming back from that.
There are people in here that I have to ask myself, I sometimes had this moment in interviews when I'm particularly writing about very rich people who get into big trouble, which is a pattern that I write about a lot.
Yeah.
And the single most important question in these moments is always the same, which is what in God's name possessed you? Like, in what conceivable world did you think this was okay? And I
Yeah.
kind of feel like that's the question being posed to an entire class of Americans right now. And honestly, to be more precise about it, the Brits are asking that question much more effectively of their own ruling class than we are in ours. And I'd like to see
And
a
the
little more of that
king
here.
and the
Yeah.
king, right? The king of England is now saying that he would like to see accountability for his brother.
Yeah.
Donald Trump refuses to even look at Howard Lutnick, but the king of England is saying he would like to see accountability for his brother, whatever that looks like.
This is a pattern that I have to say does not usually end particularly well for the oligarchs. One of the things that you see in history is what's known as autocratic backfire, which is there is like a point, it's like a tripwire with the public,
Mm.
where at a certain point, the amount of abuse and of entrenchment of their own money and power and privilege just passes some point that the public can't bear. I think we're seeing it in political terms in our country right now with the collapse of Donald Trump's support. This is autocratic backfire in action right now.
Evan, I know it's a good interview because I have a bunch of notes.
I love
uh,
chatting with you, Molly. We should
Thank
do it
you.
whenever the nation is collapsing, which seems to be a
Yes, which
permanent
luckily
condition.
will probably be for at least another year or 2.
Alas,
Yes.
alas.
Thank you, Evan.
My pleasure. Great to chat with you.